Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. I'm Kevin Bille, and as always, we appreciate you joining us. Well, hey, today we're really looking forward to this. We're fortunate to have Mark Batterson joining us. He's the lead pastor at National Community Church in Washington, D.C., and he's also best-selling author. And the most recent book right here, I've got my book and I've got my shirt, Win the Day. We're going to jump into that today. So I'm really, really looking forward to this. Mark, what's going on?
Hey, Kevin, good to see you. Excited about the convo and man, I love leadership, love sports, love habit formation, and so I'm guessing we'll kind of touch on all of those bases. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, yeah, let's get into the book a little bit. I've heard of you before. Obviously, I read In the Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day, I think first. But this was introduced to me, and it just immediately hit me. One, and I didn't tell you this when we were speaking, but because I wanted to write something similar to this, and you beat me to it. But no, I think it resonates so much with me. But two, we were on a Zoom call together. It's probably been what 4 or 5 weeks ago, right?
Yeah,
And so
yep.
I was, that Zoom call was all coaches. From what you know, let's go there first. But from what you know of coaches, why do you think this book has resonated with them so much? Or for those that are listening that haven't read it, Mark, why will it resonate with them?
Man, I think it's because, Kevin, when it comes to athletics, but really anything, like there is no finish line. You never arrive. You've got to continue to push the envelope, faster, better, stronger. And coaches, I think, are always looking for a way. Not just the classic kind of pep talk that you think about in the movies in a locker room. Man, how do you unlock some of the mental potential and the ability? So much of success has to do with frame of mind, and you got to train your body, but you got to have the right mindset. And so I knew that this book would resonate because you got to win the practice to win the game. You got to win the day to win the week. And Kevin, the funny thing is I actually went I was shocked that there weren't like 17 books with this title.
Yeah, yeah.
um because I certainly didn't make it up. In fact, fun story. Ryan Saunders, coach of the Timberwolves, of course endorsed the book, but he told me that his dad, kind of, who is a legendary
Yep.
coach, Flip Saunders, that win the day was kind of his dad's mantra or motto. So this is nothing new.
Hmm.
I just wanted to write a book around that idea.
Right, right. Yeah. And I want to start with weaknesses. Like, give me your perspective on this. Because I'd just be anxious to hear your response. Like, hey, I'm 43. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm bad at. So I'm just going to focus on the good, and I'm going to surround myself with others to focus on my bad. Where does that fit for you on everything?
Well, I'm just going to stream of consciousness and answer with the first thing that comes to mind. You're a ball player, so you know your strong hand and your weak hand,
Hmm.
and like you got to play to your strength, no doubt. But you also have to play. Yeah, you have to work on that weakness, and I think sometimes there's something called the theory of compensation. I don't know if we want to go too deep into this, but it's this idea that your perceived disadvantages are actually disguised advantages. And I'll give you a simple example. And this is fascinating to me. A study of entrepreneurs, people who started a business, 35% of them are dyslexic. In other words, had some academic challenges learning how to read. But the theory is that because it was harder for them to learn how to read,
Uh-huh.
they had to adapt and cultivate a different skill set or gift set. Or in some cases, Kevin, they just had to have a work ethic to work harder
Right.
to perform in the classroom. And so, uh, I would be wary of dismissing your weaknesses too quickly, because that is where you can really cultivate a strength. And I'll make it personal. For me, writing's not a natural gifting. Now, I've written 20 books, but I read 3,000 books before I wrote one. And so because it didn't come naturally, I had to read those books and reverse engineer them. And so if it had come naturally, I don't think I would have read as much. And I don't think my books would read as good if I hadn't read as much. And so that's kind of my quick take. And that may not even be the question that you were asking,
No,
Kevin.
no, that
But
makes total sense. I think that's really good. And I was going to get to you. I'll circle back to those 3,000 books, but no, I think that's good. I just, that's an interesting perception, I think, in general, of what people feel as if their strengths and weaknesses. And early on in the book, there was a part in there about deliberate practice that really caught my attention. And I don't know if it's just because of how I'm wired or being that athlete and coach, but like talk to us about this right now, and then those dimensions that go along with that, which I believe are three of them. But just get into that,
yeah.
however you'd like.
Yeah, and I bet for, some people listening, that rings a bell. That idea comes from Anders Ericsson, who also coined that 10,000 hour rule. But the key is it has to be deliberate practice. And I think the most interesting thing to me there is it's got to be at least at 70% effort because you have to disrupt homeostasis.
Hmm.
And Kevin, since we both have a little bit of basketball background, it's the difference between shooting free throws at the beginning of a practice when you're fresh, as opposed to doing some wind sprints and being exhausted and then shooting the free throws in more of a game simulation. And so Erickson says that the opposite of deliberate practice is naive practice. And so you can actually cultivate bad habits
Hmm.
unintentionally. And so I think it's a little piece of the book where whether it's a physical habit or a relational habit or a spiritual habit, in my experience, if it's not 70% effort, you're going through the motions
Yeah,
and it's not really going to have the kind of payoff that you want.
it's good. Yeah, it's real good. I think early on too, it said, according to some estimates in here, I want to make sure I have this right, that as many as 80% of our thoughts each day are negative. And I mean, that was an eye catcher for me as well. Why is that, Mark? And what are some ways that people can flip the script, habit number one, with this?
Yeah. I think that was a Cleveland Clinic study that found about 80%. Now, Kevin, I don't want to go preacher on you. I'm a pastor, but that I see myself as a spiritual coach.
Right.
Um, but let me just say this for those who maybe don't have the same frame of reference. There's this moment where the Israelites are spying out the promised land. Moses sends 12 spies in, and two of them come back with a positive report, 10 of them come back with a negative report, and everybody buys the negativity. Long story short, they have to spend 40 years in the wilderness. And so when people say to me that positivity and negativity is really that big a deal, oh, it's a huge deal. It might
Right.
cost you 40 years. Like this is a big deal. So uh, in a practical sense, when I am struggling with negativity, whether that's channeled towards myself, because sometimes I get down on myself, or other people, when I get frustrated with other people, here's one thing that resets for me. I go right back to my gratitude journal.
Yeah.
You have to focus on things that you're grateful for to foster some of that positivity. In fact, here's a best practice. Our staff, we begin every meeting by sharing wins. Why? Well, because like what we do is really hard. So we got to make sure that we're celebrating what we want to see more of. And I think that works on a team. I think it works in a boardroom, in a locker room. It works in any room.
Yeah.
You got to really focus on the positive. Otherwise, if 80% of your thoughts are negative, you are fighting an uphill battle at that point. So that first habit, flip the script, is kind of all about telling yourself a different story.
Yeah, and I think what I think of right away, I literally talked to a coach yesterday, and now that I'm out of it, I just laugh. I'm like, come on, man, like, because it's such coach talk, right? And when you talk about these wins, Mark, when I was coaching, you got the win, you expected it, you went on to the next thing right away. You didn't enjoy it. when you lost, you stayed up, you watched more film, you doubted yourself, you wondered what you should have done differently, so on and so forth. So I love that. We kind of do the same thing here. We call it one up. And every now and again, we do one up and one downs to keep things balanced. But the one meeting that we start the week off with, hey, what's your one up? And that's very,
Mm.
it's positive energy too, I think. And I think some people might think pride and ego come into that, but I think it is important and it does build some confidence within your team as well. So I love it. Hey, true or false? One of the most critical things that you can do as a leader is say no.
True. And my default setting is yes. And that's gotten me into so much trouble because saying yes to one thing is saying no to something else. Um, let's put it in a family context. When I first started writing books, I started getting some invitations to go speak at different places, and I didn't turn down very many of those, Kevin. I was going all over the place, and guess what? My family suffered because of it, and so I had to reset. And at the end of the day, I want to be famous in my home, and it's hard to be famous in your home if you're never home. And
Yeah.
so I had to put boundaries in place, and I'm only going to do 7 overnight speaking trips a year. And so that's my current boundary. Another example is I'll only serve on 3 boards simultaneously. And what that does is it allows me to say no without feeling bad because,
Mhm.
I can only be in one place at one time. So, yeah, definitely. Gotta work on that no word.
Yeah, and I literally was going to go into boundaries next. So great timing. Like, what would you say? I mean, I think it is probably obvious, but and so thank you for mentioning that. What would you say are the overall benefits of people putting boundaries in place, regardless if it's for their family, work, whatever it might be? Just what are some of those benefits, Mark?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is right now in my leadership context, between the COVID crisis, the
Hmm.
racial tension, the political polarization. I mean, everybody feels that in some way.
Right.
If you watch the news at all, uh, I'm really struggling with decision fatigue. I'm just
Wow.
tired. I mean, there's just too many decisions to make. And so I think you have to learn to make pre-decisions. And that really what a boundary is. It's making the decision before you have to make the decision so that you aren't spending all of that time and energy agonizing every single time. So I think learning to make the right pre-decisions is what really sets you up. Um, and this may seem like a silly example, and I listen, I'm not up for Father of the Year award. This isn't like me pretending that somehow I've got it all figured out. But if my kids text me or call me on my phone, I'm going to answer it. Now,
Yeah.
listen, there may be a situation where I'll say, "Hey, is this urgent? Can I?" But I always want my family to know that they have first dibs, that they can get a hold of me anytime, and that's like one of those pre-decisions. I don't really have to think about it in the moment. But by the way, if your workout routine isn't a pre-decision, whoo, it can get demotivating at times. And that's why, Kevin, I think like a training plan, for example, I'm training
Yeah.
to bike a century this year.
Oh,
Like
wow.
you got to have the plan, which is a pre-decision, and then that's going to help you execute.
Going back a little bit, to some of those boundaries and other things just in your life. And I think this is really something that people would benefit from hearing, or if you're that person that says yes, or, there's criticism that's involved in your seat, in my seat. Head coaches, when you make that assistant to head coach 18-inch jump, all the criticism comes your way, right? So how do you respond to criticism? And has this I got to assume, has this changed over time? Because I'm sure even in your role pastoring 20 years ago, you weren't able to maybe, or you were able to do some things now that maybe you're not, I don't know. But where do you stand on that with the criticism and just in general, you know, eh, responding to it and how much it's changed?
Yeah, I mean, it never goes away.
Hmm.
I mean, as an author, you get some negative reviews. and it's hard to hear. But the last time I checked, the diffusion of innovation, 16% of people on the bell curve are resistors. I don't care if your name is Moses and you're coming down Mount Sinai with stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God. There is still going to be 16% of people who are resistors. So, I, what I've tried to do, Kevin, is really learn from that, because sometimes people who are resistant or even oppositional or even critical, y- 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 well, I want to be careful here. Erwin McManus once said, Don't let uh, criticism pierce your heart unless it first passes through the filter of scripture." So you've got to have a really good filtering system.
Right.
But it's okay to listen to the questions, listen to the resistance, and can it actually fine tune your vision and make you a little bit better? And that's easier said than done. So I better flip that coin and say one of my favorite words is ultra crepidarianism. And it's someone who feigns expertise at something that they really know nothing about. You know what it is, Kevin? It's the Monday morning quarterbacks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, come on. I people who aren't in the game criticize by creating. Go do
Mhm,
it better.
mhm,
Is
mhm.
my thing. And then one last little thought: if you live off of compliments, you're going to die by criticism.
Yeah,
So
boy.
it's just kind of it's hard.
Yeah,
It's all about our ego and. I want to be someone who brags about other people behind their back. And so those are just some thoughts and things that help me, but you never get beyond
right,
it getting to you.
right. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Getting back to the book, what would you say? What if seven habits, daily habits to help you stress less and accomplish more? What if seven's too much for an individual, Mark? How would you encourage them to approach that if maybe they're overwhelmed at, well, seven, where would they go? How would they start?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, and I even say in the beginning of the book, like, Hey, you're gonna have a lot more success if you work on one of these habits."
Hmm.
And so if you need to bury dead yesterdays, if you're someone that there's something in your past that's really holding you back, then probably habit one, flip the script, or habit two, kiss the wave, are gonna be things that you need to work on. Maybe you're just out of rhythm or out of routine. Well, then you need to eat the frog. You
Yeah.
need to figure out how to um, reimagine your morning routine, for example. Or maybe it's flying the kite. It's these little things that make a big difference. Um, or it might be imagining unborn tomorrows. And that's where wind the clock, this idea that time is measured in minutes, life is measured in moments, or cut the rope. There are moments where you have to make grand gestures. It's my wife and I packing all of our earthly belongings into a 15-foot U-Haul, moving to DC with no place to live and no guaranteed salary. There comes a moment where sometimes you got to go big or go home. You got to take a step of faith. Faith is taking the first step before God reveals the second step. So, Kevin, I think as people read Win the Day, you identify, hey, which habit is going to help me, uh, into the next stage of my life. And it'll become clear as people read it.
Habit to kiss the wave. I love this. The obstacle is not the enemy. The obstacle is the way. Well, actually, another Ryan Holiday, one of my favorite books. The obstacle is the
Yeah.
way. I mean, this is yes, yes, yes. Like, why are people? Why are they blinded by this concept? And mostly, they want nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Carol Dweck wrote a brilliant book about growth mindset, fixed mindset. And I won't deep dive it, but with a fixed mindset, if you fail, you're a failure.
Hmm.
A growth mindset, if you fail, well, success is well managed failure. So now there's an opportunity to learn. It's kind of that, watching the game film, after a loss, Kevin. It's that idea. But let me make this one personal. My wife had a bout with cancer, and read a piece of poetry like right after that diagnosis, and it posed a question: "What have you come to teach me?"
Mm.
That's a hard question to ask when you just get a cancer diagnosis. And the reality is, right when the day came out, she got a second diagnosis, and we fought that fight a second time. Now she's on the other side and rang the bell, and we're doing good. But you have to ask that question: what have you come to teach me? Because if you don't learn the lesson, you're going to end up right back where you were.
Yeah, very good. Good. Thank you for sharing that. Eat the frog, the habit stacking, the morning routine. I mean, I'm behind all this. I understand and back, if you will, on why it's so important. But tell us that to you, why are these things so important, and why is this one where it is in the book?
Yeah, you bring up habit stacking, and that idea is nothing new. I mean, you read any book on habit formation, and you're going to find that concept. But the idea there is you couple a more difficult habit with something that just comes naturally, or even a routine. I, let me have fun with this. Did you know 80% of people are dehydrated? Which is crazy, and it's
Wow.
funny because I think I just saw you take a sip of water.
Not me. Yeah.
Um, here would be an example of habit stacking. You don't go to the bathroom until you finish however
Right.
much water you need to drink. It's kind of this, you couple these two activities. For me personally, I do a daily Bible reading plan, and I do it in the morning, and I do it with my latte with 2 shots of espresso. And part of it is that the Bible reads better with caffeine. And so it makes those two routines kind of more meaningful when I couple them or marry them or stack them together. And so it's just about finding little things that help you remind yourself. It's an art and a science.
Mhm.
And the crazy thing, it's really nothing new. This goes all the way back to I'll make this short, back to the Shema. It's this Jewish idea of write the commandments on the door frames of your home. Why? Well, when you go out, when you come home, then you have a reminder. Like, it's this idea that you've got to build it into the warp and woof of your life.
And would you say, man, Mark, I know I'm in the mid 50s of these. I've been so blessed, and the reason I kind of started this was to be around so many, quality leaders, and it's like just give me a way to push that out, add value and impact. Would you say, because to me, all these things that you're talking about, and I want to get to cut the rope next, but isn't it the daily discipline that they're just able to do it?
Yeah. I mean, that it it you well, the working theory of the book, Kevin, you know this, is almost anyone can do almost anything if they work at it long enough, hard enough, and smart enough.
Yeah.
It's the cumulative effect. It's the compound interest on that daily piece. And so I think what happens is this: usually a habit starts out as discipline, and then it becomes desire. And I
That's
don't
good.
deep dive this, but there's a guy named Dr. William Glasser. I mean, this is probably 4 decades ago that he wrote about this idea of positive addiction. And it's a fascinating concept. All of us are addicts, would be his argument. The question is it a good addiction or
Mm,
a bad addiction?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so what you have to do is, and I would call this habit switching, which is different than habit stacking. You've got to take that hurtful, harmful habit, and you can't just stop doing it. In psychology, it's called a double bind. If I say be spontaneous, you can't be. I just put
Right.
you in a double bind. You've got to replace that negative habit with that positive habit, and might start with discipline, but then it becomes desire, and it almost becomes this positive addiction that now you do the right thing more intuitively.
Yeah, and it's almost like you can't be without it. Well, the habit to five, to cut the rope, doesn't that affect a lot of what we're talking about right now, Mark?
It does, because there comes a moment where you have to, and it's such a fun story. Should I take 60 seconds and just tell it?
Yeah, go.
I mean, it's the original elevator pitch. It's a
Yeah.
guy named Elisha Otis who, the 1853 World's Fair wants to sell his elevator brake, and he pulls off this dramatic demonstration. He's up on a platform in the Crystal Palace, and he yells, "Cut the rope!" And an axeman cuts the rope. The elevator falls a few feet.
Mhm.
The safety elevator works, the safety brake works, and voila. The next thing you know, New York City is full of skyscrapers. Why? Because the elevator is what made it possible. And it started with this moment where someone had to take the risk and cut the rope. And so that's kind of the working metaphor. What grand gesture do you need to make in whatever dream you're going after?
Yeah, that's good. So these habits, are you willing to admit to us which one's your favorite, or don't you have one?
I really think that flip the script is the one that the battle is won or lost in the mind. And if you want to change your life, you have to change your story. And so I feel like that first one, if you don't get that right, the rest of the book, you can eat the frog, you
Mhm.
can cut the rope, but you aren't telling yourself the right story. And so I think that one probably is the most important. Probably eat the frog is the most fun to say, though. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
Mark Twainism that if you
yeah,
ever have to eat a live frog, do it first thing in the morning. Then you know that the hardest thing is
that's
behind you,
right.
which is hilarious and kind of ridiculous, but is true.
Just a couple things, maybe in closing before we get to three pointers, Mark. Just some personal questions. I'd be curious. I literally was on a podcast a couple months ago, and no joke, somebody asked me, and this was before I read the book. Somebody asked me how I define success, and I said, "Well, when I was 20, 30, 40, or now at 43." And he said, "Now," and I said, "Success to me is I just want to win the day." I
Mm,
don't, yesterday's over. I don't control tomorrow yet. I'm locked in. I'm more present if I can win the day. How
wow.
do you personally, at this point of your career, define success?
Wow. I love your answer, Kevin. Probably 10, 12, 15 years ago, went through an exercise of, at the end of the day, what is success?
Hmm.
And for me, I think success is when those who know you best respect you most.
Mm,
And that's my wife and my kids. So
yeah.
listen, I love being a pastor. I love being an author. It's an opportunity to impact, pastoring thousands of people, writing millions of people. But it really is my wife and kids that I want to be better in private than I am in public. I want to be the
Yeah.
real deal. And so for me, success has a lot to do with integrity and with character. And I'm a work in progress. I am as imperfect as the next person, but I think that is how I've been defining success for quite a while now.
It's good. It's real good. I know that I say that a couple times a week. Don't try to be a public success and a private failure, right?
Mm.
What have you learned in this past year over this pandemic? Maybe some things in general, or just about yourself as a leader, as a husband, as a father.
Yeah. Um, I've learned that leaders stay calm and carry on
Mm,
when everybody else is panicking, when
mm,
everybody else is overreacting, when everybody else is just kind of caught in whatever the current is. Those are the moments that leaders operate based on their convictions, and you stay calm and you carry on. I'm a big believer in the Stockdale paradox: confront the
mm,
brutal facts with unwavering faith. And I'll say one more thing. I've got a friend who is an admiral and used to work a few doors down from the president. He was the Homeland Security and counterterrorism deputy. And so he's managing crisis all the time. And I asked him, hey, what's your MO? And Kevin, I love what he said. You have to think about it, but this is such a great mantra for leaders. He said, I reserve the right to get smarter later. I think that's really good.
It's
And that's kind of been my MO here for the last year.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, hey, you mentioned earlier reading 3,000 books. And we always when we get done and head into three pointers, we talk about books on here. I'm a reader, so I gotta think you'll be able to give us a couple suggestions, maybe other than the 20 you wrote. But has there been a book or two, other than the Bible, of course, that's impacted you, or maybe one you're reading now that you could just let our readers know about?
Yeah, I mean, I read all over the map because I think creativity is cross pollinating and then combining ideas. So, this is a random example, but it's a book that's sitting on my desk. I'm almost finished with the 99% Invisible City, which is a podcast too. But I love reading random stuff like that. I love Malcolm Gladwell. Adam Grant is quickly becoming one of my favorite writers. But
Yeah.
I love biography too. I mean, biography really helps me hack other people's habits and kind of get a sense of, you try to reverse engineer their life a little bit. And so it's a hard question for me to ask. I love writers like A.W. Tozer, who are from a generation ago. Uh, and I like anything about anything I can get my hands on that's well researched and um, yeah, a book just sitting here that I just read, Breath by James. I think it's James Nestor. Brilliant book on respiration. And as someone who had asthma for 40 years, but was miraculously healed and ran a marathon to celebrate it. I love that book.
Yeah, I bet.
So those are
Yeah, it's
a
good.
few of my favorites.
Good for sure. Well, hey, we're gonna take you back here a couple years and let you knock down some threes here. So three
Okay.
pointers here to finish. If you gotta go a little longer than rapid fire, feel free, please. Number one, if people could take home, or just learn one thing from this talk, what would you want that one thing to be?
Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is mystery. You got to win the day.
It's good. Number two, if Mark could have come over here today and been behind this mic and been Kevin and asked Mark a question that I did not ask in our time together, what question would have you asked?
Huh. I maybe does leadership get any easier? And the answer is no. It doesn't get any easier. The stakes go up. But the last time I checked, the blessings of God will complicate your life. That's kind of one of my mantras. The reward in the parable of the talents is not early retirement or extra vacation time. The reward for good work is more work. In other words, God says, let me complicate your life. And so if you're looking for an easy way out, that just isn't leadership. Leadership is probably going to get harder, but I'm going to get stronger and better and wiser. And so don't be too quick to despise the complications, because I think they're part of the blessing.
Good question. Well, hey, finally, good stuff is the name of this. Just give us some more good stuff in closing. Anything that maybe is on your heart, or just anything you feel is appropriate right now.
Man, you just made me hungry because my favorite burger place is called Good Stuff around the corner here on Capitol Hill.
Nice.
It's a burger with bacon and an onion ring on it and barbecue sauce. But that's not what was your question? You got me totally distracted.
Just anything in general, though, or you would feel is appropriate right now. Some good stuff just to wrap this up.
Yeah, I would say you overestimate what you can do in a year or two, but you underestimate what God can do in 10 or 20.
Mm.
Long obedience in the same direction. It's about daily habits. They don't just add up, they multiply over time. And probably with that, I mean, the closing thought to me would be where we started. Almost anyone can accomplish almost anything if they work at it long enough, hard enough, and smart enough.
It's good. Thank you very much. Three for three. There you go, man. Hey, just finally, where can our listeners connect with you, social media wise? Where can they get some of the books? Anything that's going on with church right now? Anything in general, please, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Just markbatterson.com and same handle, just my name on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
Well, good. Well, hey, Mark, I know you're an extremely busy guy. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for your time today. The book is phenomenal. I told you we're started here in our men's group. I love the realness and authenticity, vulnerability that you share. I just have a great deal of respect from it from afar. I know that you have impacted and are impacting tons of people. So thanks for that and all you do. I know I've won the day by just having this conversation with you, and I know plenty others will as well once they listen to it.
Hey, Kevin, absolute joy and privilege. And I think this was a fun interview. And so I'm just, as a former ball player, I'm just going to say you get a lot of assist from this interview because you asked some great questions. Love the conversation. Blessings.
All right, I appreciate it. Well, hey, everybody, thanks again for joining us today. Email me, goodstuffkevin@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you as always, and look forward to continue staying in touch. Till next time, good stuff.